When we talk about mental health in Asian American communities, it's important to start with history. Many Asian cultures have deep-rooted beliefs about mental health that go back centuries. For example, in some East Asian traditions, mental illness was often seen as a punishment for bad karma or the result of spiritual imbalance. These ideas are still present today, even among younger generations who live in the US. In many Asian families, mental health isn't discussed openly. There's a strong emphasis on keeping problems private to avoid losing face or bringing shame to the family. This cultural value, known as saving face, can make it hard for people to admit they're struggling. Imagine growing up in a household where emotions like sadness or anxiety are seen as weaknesses. It's no wonder that many Asian Americans feel hesitant to talk about their mental health. Another factor is the role of family. In many Asian cultures, the family unit is more important than the individual. This collectivist mindset means that personal struggles are often downplayed to keep the family harmony intact. For instance, if someone in the family is feeling depressed, they might hide it to avoid burdening others. Over time, this can lead to feelings of isolation and worsen their condition. Immigration also plays a big role. Many Asian Americans are either first-generation immigrants or children of immigrants. Moving to a new country can be stressful, especially when you're trying to adapt to a completely different culture. The pressure to succeed in a foreign land can take a toll on mental health. For older immigrants, language barriers and feelings of displacement can make it even harder to seek help. Let's not forget religion and spirituality. Many Asian cultures are influenced by Buddhism, Confucianism, or Hinduism. These belief systems often emphasize inner peace, self-discipline, and harmony. While these values can be positive, they can also create unrealistic expectations. For example, someone might feel guilty for not being able to meditate their problems away. This adds another layer of complexity to how mental health is viewed. Understanding these historical and cultural factors is key to addressing mental health stigma. By recognizing where these beliefs come from, we can start to challenge them and create a more supportive environment for everyone. Family is at the heart of many Asian cultures. It's not just about blood relations. It's about loyalty, respect, and responsibility. These values shape how people think about mental health. For example, in collectivist cultures, the needs of the group often come before the needs of the individual. This can be both a strength and a challenge. On one hand, having a strong support system can be incredibly helpful. If someone is going through a tough time, their family might step in to provide care and encouragement. But on the other hand, the pressure to prioritize the family's well-being over your own can make it hard to address personal issues. Imagine feeling like you're letting your family down just by admitting you're not okay. Community ties also play a big role. In many Asian cultures, community approval is highly valued. People often worry about what others will think if they admit to having mental health challenges. For instance, a young adult might avoid therapy because they're afraid their neighbors or extended family will find out. This fear of judgment can prevent people from getting the help they need. Collectivist values can also affect how mental health is treated. In some cases, families might try to handle mental health issues internally, rather than seeking professional help. They might turn to traditional remedies or rely on advice from elders. While these approaches can be comforting, they're not always enough to address serious conditions like depression or anxiety. Another issue is the expectation to succeed. Many Asian families place a high value on academic and career achievements. This can create immense pressure, especially for younger generations. Kids might feel like they have to excel in school or risk disappointing their parents. Over time, this pressure can lead to burnout, stress, and even mental health disorders. Despite these challenges, there's hope. More and more Asian American families are starting to recognize the importance of mental health. By fostering open conversations and encouraging empathy, we can create a culture where people feel safe sharing their struggles. After all, mental health is a family matter, and it's something we can tackle together. When it comes to mental health, numbers can tell a powerful story. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Asian Americans are less likely to seek mental health services compared to other racial and ethnic groups. This might sound surprising at first, but it makes sense when you consider the cultural stigma surrounding mental health in many Asian communities. For example, studies show that about 18% of Asian Americans experience a diagnosable mental health condition each year. That's roughly the same rate as the general population, but here's the catch. Only about 8% of Asian Americans actually seek help, compared to 18% of the overall US population. This gap highlights just how much stigma and barriers to care affect this community. Depression and anxiety are among the most common mental health issues affecting Asian Americans. Young adults in particular are at higher risk. The pressure to succeed academically and professionally, combined with the stress of balancing two cultures, can take a toll. In fact, suicide is one of the leading causes of death for Asian American youth. These statistics are alarming, but they also underscore the urgent need for action. Another trend worth noting is the rise in mental health challenges among older Asian Americans. Many seniors face isolation, especially if they're recent immigrants who don't speak English fluently. They may also struggle with adjusting to life in a new country or dealing with the loss of their social networks back home. Unfortunately, these issues often go unnoticed because mental health isn't a priority in many families. It's also important to recognize the diversity within the Asian American community. For instance, Southeast Asians such as Vietnamese, Cambodian, and Hmong Americans often face higher rates of PTSD due to war-related trauma. On the other hand, East Asians like Chinese and Korean Americans may experience more stress related to academic and career expectations. Understanding these differences is crucial for addressing mental health needs effectively. While the numbers paint a sobering picture, they also point to opportunities for change. By raising awareness and breaking down barriers to care, we can ensure that more people get the support they need. After all, mental health affects everyone, regardless of age, gender, or background. Immigration is a life-changing experience, but it's not always easy. For many Asian Americans, moving to the US means leaving behind everything familiar: family, friends, language, and culture. This transition can be exciting, but it can also bring a lot of stress. One of the biggest challenges is acculturation, or adapting to a new culture while holding on to your own. Imagine trying to balance two worlds: the traditions and values you grew up with, and the norms of the society you now live in. For some, this process feels seamless, but for others, it can create tension and confusion. Take language barriers, for example. Many first-generation immigrants struggle to communicate in English, which can make everyday tasks feel overwhelming. Going to the doctor, filling out paperwork, or even asking for directions can become stressful experiences. Over time, these small frustrations can add up and contribute to feelings of anxiety or depression. Cultural differences can also play a role. In the US, there's often an emphasis on independence and self-expression, but in many Asian cultures the focus is on community and harmony. This clash of values can leave people feeling torn. A young adult might want to pursue a creative career, but their parents might expect them to choose something more stable, like engineering or medicine. These conflicting expectations can lead to stress and guilt. Then there's the issue of identity. Many second-generation Asian Americans describe feeling caught between two worlds. At home, they might follow traditional customs, but outside, they're navigating mainstream American culture. This dual identity can be a source of pride, but it can also create confusion and stress. Some people might feel like they don't fully belong in either world. Immigrants also face practical challenges like finding jobs or affordable housing. Discrimination and racism can make these struggles even harder. Studies show that experiencing racial bias increases the risk of mental health issues like anxiety and depression. For Asian Americans, stereotypes like the model minority myth can add another layer of pressure. While this label might seem positive, it erases the real struggles that many people face. Despite these challenges, resilience is a common theme in immigrant stories. Many Asian Americans find strength in their communities and cultural heritage. By acknowledging the unique struggles of immigration and acculturation, we can work toward creating a more supportive environment for everyone. In many Asian cultures, mental health has long been misunderstood. Traditional beliefs often frame mental illness as something beyond a person's control, sometimes even as a punishment. For example, in some Hindu and Buddhist traditions, mental health struggles are seen as the result of bad karma from past lives. This idea can make people feel like they're being judged for something they didn't do in this lifetime. Similarly, Confucianism, which has deeply influenced East Asian cultures, emphasizes harmony, discipline, and self-control. In this context, mental health issues might be viewed as a failure to maintain inner balance. Someone struggling with anxiety or depression might be told to just meditate more or be stronger. These well-meaning suggestions, while rooted in cultural values, can make people feel like their struggles are their own fault. Shame is another big factor. In many Asian families, mental illness is seen as a source of embarrassment, not just for the individual but for the entire family. This belief stems from the importance of saving face or maintaining a good reputation in the community. For instance, if someone in the family is diagnosed with schizophrenia, it might be kept a secret to avoid gossip or judgment. Unfortunately, this secrecy can prevent people from getting the help they need. Even today, these traditional beliefs linger. A young adult might hesitate to talk about their anxiety because they don't want to be labeled as weak or ungrateful. They might worry that their parents will see therapy as unnecessary or even shameful. These fears aren't unfounded. They're shaped by centuries of cultural conditioning. It's important to note that not everyone subscribes to these beliefs. Many Asian Americans are challenging these outdated ideas and advocating for change. But understanding where stigma comes from is the first step toward breaking it down. By acknowledging these roots, we can start to create a more compassionate and open-minded approach to mental health. Philosophies like Confucianism and Buddhism have shaped Asian cultures for thousands of years. While these belief systems offer valuable lessons about harmony, discipline, and compassion, they can also contribute to mental health stigma when taken out of context. Confucianism, for example, places a strong emphasis on social order and filial piety, the idea that children should respect and care for their parents. This value is beautiful in many ways, but it can also create pressure to suppress personal struggles. If someone is feeling overwhelmed, they might hide it to avoid burdening their family. Over time, this can lead to feelings of isolation and worsen their condition. Buddhism, on the other hand, teaches the importance of mindfulness and inner peace. These principles can be incredibly helpful for managing stress and anxiety. However, they can also create unrealistic expectations. For instance, someone might feel guilty for not being able to meditate their problems away. Or they might believe that seeking therapy goes against the idea of self-reliance. Other philosophies, like Taoism, emphasize living in harmony with nature and accepting life's ups and downs. While this perspective can foster resilience, it can also discourage people from addressing their mental health challenges directly. Someone might think, if I just accept my suffering, it will go away on its own. Unfortunately, this isn't always true, especially for conditions like depression or PTSD. Religious practices also play a role. In many Asian cultures, rituals and prayers are used to address spiritual or emotional struggles. While these practices can provide comfort, they're not always enough to treat serious mental health disorders. For example, someone experiencing severe anxiety might turn to prayer instead of seeking professional help. This reliance on spiritual solutions can delay treatment and worsen their condition. Despite these challenges, there's hope. Many Asian American communities are finding ways to blend traditional philosophies with modern mental health care. For instance, mindfulness practices are now widely used in therapy to help people manage stress and build resilience. By combining the best of both worlds, we can create a more holistic approach to mental health that respects cultural values while addressing real needs. Stigma doesn't just exist in people's minds. It creates real barriers that prevent individuals from getting the help they need. For many Asian Americans, seeking mental health care feels like stepping into uncharted territory. The fear of judgment, rejection, or even ostracism can be paralyzing. One major barrier is the lack of awareness about available resources. Many Asian Americans simply don't know where to start when it comes to finding mental health services. Even if they do, cultural differences can make navigating the system feel overwhelming. For example, someone who speaks limited English might struggle to communicate with a therapist or understand medical jargon. This language gap alone can discourage people from reaching out for help. Cost is another significant hurdle. Mental health care isn't always affordable, especially for immigrant families or those without insurance. Some people might worry about the financial burden of therapy or medication, choosing instead to tough it out on their own. Others might not realize that free or low-cost options like community clinics or online counseling are available. Cultural mismatch between patients and providers also plays a role. Many Asian Americans prefer working with therapists who understand their cultural background and values. Unfortunately, there's still a shortage of culturally competent mental health professionals. Without this understanding, therapy sessions can feel impersonal or even alienating. For instance, a therapist might encourage a patient to express their emotions openly, but this approach might clash with the patient's upbringing, where emotional restraint was emphasized. Family dynamics can further complicate things. In some households, discussing mental health is considered taboo. A young adult might want to see a therapist but fear disappointing their parents or being labeled as weak. This internal conflict can stop them from taking the first step. Even if they do seek help, they might hide it from their family, which can lead to feelings of guilt or isolation. The consequences of these barriers are serious. Untreated mental health conditions can worsen over time, leading to more severe symptoms and even physical health problems. For example, chronic stress from untreated anxiety can increase the risk of heart disease or high blood pressure. By addressing stigma and improving access to care, we can help more people get the support they need before it's too late. When stigma takes hold, its effects ripple outward, touching every aspect of life. For individuals, the weight of shame and silence can be crushing. Imagine feeling like you're carrying a secret that no one can know about. Not your friends, not your family, and certainly not your community. This isolation can make mental health struggles feel even heavier. For many Asian Americans, the fear of being judged can lead to self-stigmatization. They might internalize negative beliefs about mental illness, convincing themselves that they're weak or unworthy of help. Over time, this can erode their self-esteem and make it harder to recover. Some might turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms, like substance abuse or overworking, to distract themselves from their pain. Families aren't immune to the impact of stigma either. When mental health issues go unaddressed, they can strain relationships and create tension at home. For example, a parent might dismiss their child's depression as laziness or rebellion, leading to arguments and misunderstandings. Or a spouse might feel helpless watching their partner struggle, unsure of how to offer support without breaking cultural norms. These dynamics can fracture family bonds and leave everyone feeling disconnected. Communities also suffer when stigma thrives. Silence around mental health prevents open conversations, leaving people to suffer in the shadows. This lack of dialogue reinforces harmful stereotypes and perpetuates the cycle of stigma. It also limits opportunities for collective healing. Imagine a neighborhood where people felt safe sharing their stories and supporting one another. How much stronger would that community be? But stigma doesn't just hurt, it also holds back progress. When mental health is stigmatized, funding and resources often fall by the wayside. Schools, workplaces, and local organizations might overlook the importance of mental health education and support programs. This neglect leaves entire communities vulnerable, especially during times of crisis like the COVID-19 pandemic, which disproportionately affected Asian American mental health. Breaking the cycle of stigma starts with small steps, encouraging open conversations, educating others, and advocating for culturally sensitive care can make a big difference. By addressing stigma head-on, we can create a world where mental health is treated with the same urgency and compassion as physical health, for individuals, families, and communities alike. Growing up as an Asian American often means living between two worlds. On one hand, there's the culture of your family, steeped in traditions, values, and expectations passed down through generations. On the other hand, there's the broader American society, with its emphasis on individualism, self-expression, and independence. For many young Asian Americans, balancing these dual identities can feel like walking a tightrope. Take language, for example. Many second-generation Asian Americans grow up speaking English at school and with friends, while using their native language at home. This linguistic duality is a source of pride, but it can also create tension. Imagine trying to explain your feelings about mental health in a language your parents don't fully understand, or worse, not having the right words to describe what you're going through. Communication barriers like these can make it hard to bridge generational gaps. Generational differences in mental health views add another layer of complexity. Older generations often grew up in environments where mental health wasn't discussed openly. They might see therapy as unnecessary or even shameful. Younger generations, however, are more exposed to conversations about mental health through social media, schools, and peers. This disconnect can lead to misunderstandings. A teenager might want to talk to a counselor about their anxiety, only to be told by their parents that they're overthinking or being dramatic. Cultural expectations around success can also fuel intergenerational conflict. Many Asian American families place a high value on academic and career achievements. Parents might push their children to excel in fields like medicine, law, or engineering, believing this will ensure a stable future. But what happens when a child dreams of becoming an artist, writer, or musician? These differing aspirations can create friction, leaving the younger generation feeling torn between honoring their heritage and pursuing their passions. Despite these challenges, navigating dual identities can also be empowering. Many Asian Americans find strength in their ability to adapt and thrive in multiple cultural contexts. By fostering open conversations and mutual understanding, families can learn to embrace both sides of their identity. After all, being true to yourself doesn't mean rejecting your roots. It means finding a way to honor them while growing into who you're meant to be. Expectations can be both a blessing and a curse. In many Asian cultures, family is everything. The bonds between parents, children, and extended relatives are deep and enduring. But these close-knit relationships often come with high expectations, especially when it comes to success and behavior. For many Asian Americans, the pressure to meet familial expectations starts early. From a young age, children are encouraged, sometimes pushed, to excel academically. Grades become a measure of worth, and anything less than perfection can feel like failure. This relentless pursuit of excellence can take a toll on mental health, leading to stress, anxiety, and burnout. Societal expectations add another layer of pressure. The model minority myth, the stereotype that all Asian Americans are naturally smart, hardworking, and successful, is pervasive. While this label might seem like a compliment, it erases the diversity within the community and ignores the real struggles people face. Not every Asian American has access to the same opportunities, yet the myth creates unrealistic standards that can leave people feeling inadequate. Gender roles also play a role. In some Asian cultures, sons are often expected to carry on the family name and provide financial support, while daughters are encouraged to prioritize marriage and caregiving. These traditional roles can clash with modern values, leaving individuals feeling trapped between duty and desire. The weight of these expectations can feel suffocating. Some people might suppress their emotions to avoid disappointing their families, while others might push themselves to the brink of exhaustion trying to live up to impossible standards. Over time, this pressure can lead to serious mental health issues, including depression and anxiety. But change is possible. By challenging outdated norms and encouraging open dialogue, families can redefine what success and happiness look like. It's okay to strive for greatness, but it's also okay to prioritize mental health and well-being along the way. After all, true success isn't about meeting someone else's expectations. It's about living a life that feels authentic and fulfilling. Stereotypes might seem harmless on the surface, but they carry a heavy weight, especially for Asian Americans. The model minority stereotype is one of the most pervasive. It paints Asian Americans as naturally intelligent, hardworking, and successful. While this label might sound like a compliment, it's far from benign. In reality, it creates unrealistic expectations and erases the diversity within the community. For starters, the model minority myth ignores the struggles of many Asian American groups. Not every family has access to wealth, education, or opportunities. Southeast Asian communities, for example, often face higher rates of poverty and lower levels of educational attainment compared to East Asians. Yet, the myth lumps everyone together, making it harder for those in need to access resources and support. This stereotype also pits Asian Americans against other minority groups, creating division rather than solidarity. By portraying Asian Americans as a successful minority, the myth downplays the systemic racism and discrimination that all people of color face. This can lead to feelings of isolation and alienation, especially for those who don't fit the model mold. On a personal level, the pressure to live up to the stereotype can be exhausting. Imagine constantly feeling like you have to prove your worth, not just to others, but to yourself. For many Asian Americans, the fear of failure isn't just about letting themselves down. It's about letting their families and communities down too. This constant pressure can lead to chronic stress, anxiety, and even depression. Racial stereotypes also contribute to microaggressions. those subtle, often unintentional comments or actions that perpetuate bias. For example, someone might say, "You're so articulate for an Asian person," or "Where are you really from?" These remarks might not seem harmful, but over time they chip away at a person's self-esteem and sense of belonging. The mental health toll of these stereotypes is real. Studies show that Asian Americans who internalize the model minority myth are more likely to experience imposter syndrome, the feeling that they don't deserve their success and will eventually be found out. This can create a cycle of self-doubt and anxiety that's hard to break. By challenging these stereotypes and amplifying diverse voices, we can start to dismantle the harm they cause. It's time to recognize that no one should have to conform to a narrow definition of success, and that true progress comes from embracing our differences, not erasing them. Behind the shiny facade of the model minority myth lies a hidden burden, one that weighs heavily on the shoulders of many Asian Americans. The myth suggests that if you work hard enough, you'll succeed. But what happens when success feels out of reach? What happens when life doesn't follow the script? For many, the myth creates a sense of invisibility. Struggles like poverty, mental health challenges, or discrimination are overlooked because they don't fit the narrative of the perfect minority. This erasure can leave people feeling like their pain doesn't matter, or worse, that they're failing because they don't measure up. The myth also fosters a culture of silence. If you're supposed to be the model, admitting to struggles can feel like betrayal. A student might hide their academic difficulties to avoid being labeled as lazy. An employee might mask their burnout to maintain the appearance of competence. Over time, this suppression of emotions takes a toll, leading to exhaustion and emotional numbness. Another hidden burden is the lack of support. Because the myth portrays Asian Americans as naturally resilient, their struggles are often dismissed or ignored. Schools, workplaces, and even healthcare systems might overlook the unique challenges faced by this community. For example, a counselor might assume that an Asian American client doesn't need help because they always do well. This assumption can prevent people from getting the care they need. The myth also affects relationships. Within the community, there's often pressure to uphold the image of success. Families might push their children to achieve academically or professionally, even at the expense of their mental health. Outside the community, the myth can create resentment or jealousy from other groups, further isolating Asian Americans. Breaking free from the myth starts with acknowledging its harm. By sharing stories, advocating for change, and fostering empathy, we can create a world where success isn't defined by stereotypes, but by authenticity, resilience, and compassion. Religious and cultural institutions are the backbone of many Asian American communities. These spaces, whether they're temples, mosques, churches, or community centers, are where people gather to celebrate, reflect, and connect. They also hold immense potential for fostering mental health awareness and reducing stigma. By engaging religious and cultural institutions, we can create a supportive environment where mental health is openly discussed and prioritized. This can lead to early intervention, better access to resources, and a stronger sense of community. Working together, we can break the silence and build a future where mental health is embraced as a vital part of overall well-being.